She circles your silence like a starving wolf pacing a locked butcher's door. You didn't offer charm. You didn't explain yourself. You just said less than she expected, and it was enough to rot her sleep. Because she heard it, that awful, echoing emptiness inside your pores, that deliberate lack, that godless space where meaning should have been. And now she's rewriting you in her mind. Isn't she elevating you, cursing you, craving the unspoken because it refused to bow? You became a mirror that didn't flatter, a statue that didn't blink. And in her cathedral of control, that silence was her heresy, her hell. Not because you were cruel, but because you withheld what she demanded most, a predictable end to her fantasy. Say less than she expects, and she'll obsess, not because you're mysterious, but because you've cracked the illusion that her approval ever mattered. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video, leave your shadow in the comments, subscribe, and stay near the silence. She falls in love with what she cannot define because vagueness cannot disappoint her. She doesn't fall in love with you. Not really. She falls in love with the blank space where your biography should be. The pause after your sentence, the refusal to answer a simple question. You didn't lie, you just didn't satisfy. And that is what made you godlike to her. In a world where men grovel to be understood, where every boy translates his wounds into digestible captions, your restraint carved a silhouette sharper than any confession. She cannot possess what she cannot name, and so she worships it. She tells herself she wants honesty, clarity, emotional availability. But that is only true when the man in question is dull enough to deserve dissection. She doesn't ask for your transparency because she trusts you. She asks because she wants to predict you. And when she can't, when your reactions contradict her expectations, when your gaze is unreadable, not hostile, just unknowable, then the pedestal builds itself, not of admiration, but compulsion. She builds it because she needs to know what's at the top, even if it kills her. Your silence isn't passive, it's defiant. It denies her the victory of categorization. She has seen too many men flinch under her gaze, offering their thoughts like open throats. But you didn't. You just stared back. Not rudely, not desperately. You let her misunderstand you, and in doing so, you birthed a monster in her mind. She gave you traits you never claimed, noble ones, dark ones, hidden ones. In your absence, she invented presence, because that's what she really falls for, the man she's allowed to build from fragments. And this is why she never obsesses over the man who offers himself too early, the man who says, "Let me explain what I meant." The man who answers her texts with paragraphs and dreams of her empathy. That man is dead to her before he begins, because he didn't dare to be misunderstood. He explained himself like a debtor, but you left space. And in that space, she saw potential. Not because you were perfect, but because you were undefined. A question mark is more erotic than a period. She plays strong, independent, rational, but she's a priestess at heart, and every priestess is drawn to mystery, not kindness, not availability, but ritual. And when you broke her ritual, the cycle where she questions and the man pleads, she found herself praying to something else, to you, to your indifference, to the shadow she imagined behind your restraint. She asks herself what you're hiding, a girlfriend, a trauma, a genius. She has no evidence, just your silence. But that's all she needs, because mystery is the only lover who never grows old. Now she watches your movements like a spy. She replays the moment you looked at your phone and didn't reply. She remembers the one thing you said that didn't make sense. She Googles your favorite book. She checks your mutuals. And all the while, she builds you. Not because she loves you, but because she cannot control what she cannot define, and it terrifies her. So she calls it attraction. She calls it chemistry, but it is fear distilled into longing. Her obsession is not a compliment, it is a confession of helplessness, and it began the moment you refused to play along, the moment you said less than she expected. Not in cruelty and clarity, you didn't try to impress, you didn't embellish, you didn't chase. And so, in her world of overexposed men, your refusal became sacred, because she knows what it feels like to be desired too soon, to be read too quickly, to be claimed before she's even finished speaking. But you were different. You didn't lunge, you withheld, and so she carved meaning into that restraint. She remembers the way your voice lingered after the word, perhaps, the way you didn't justify your lateness, the way you didn't laugh to fill the silence. These small refusals became relics. She holds them in her mouth like pearls. She bites them, tastes for blood, wonders if they were insults or invitations. But you do not clarify. You simply exist a mirror that won't return her gaze. And that is why the pedestal grows. Because it's not built on worship, it's built on lack. A holy absence that no man has dared to offer her before. She will not say this out loud. She will mock you to her friends. He's so full of himself. I don't get why he's so cold. But the mocking is a mask. It buys her time. Time to process the burn you left behind. Because your silence did something her exes never managed, it survived her. And now she's trapped. Because the pedestal she built for you has no handles, no ladder, just height. And the more she imagines you, the further away you get. You become the distance she cannot cross. She doesn't want the truth. She wants the edge of it. She wants to stand on the brink of understanding and guess. You gave her that. Not by being clever, but by being incomplete. The truth would bore her. The answer would ruin the sculpture. But silence keeps her reaching. Silence forces her to invent you. And when she invents you, she gives you powers you never claimed. And if she's not careful, she'll hate you for it. Because every fantasy eventually punishes the god that disappointed it. You were not cruel. You were not careless. You simply refused to be defined. And in a world that trains women to conquer meaning, to decode, to resolve your refusal became unbearable. So she chases it, obsessively, because if she ever admitted the truth that she doesn't really know you, the entire sculpture would crack. The pedestal would vanish, and she would have to face the most terrifying possibility of all that she built, the desire herself. That you are only as powerful as her inability to finish the sentence. You didn't do anything to her. You left space, and that was enough. She filled it with worship. She filled it with rage, but the shape was always hers. Her obsession begins when your silence resists meaning, and she starts feeding herself to fill it. You didn't give her answers, so she became her own oracle. Every pause you left behind grew teeth, and she fed them what she could memory, suspicion, projection, dreams. Because silence doesn't starve her, it starves her sense of control. And that's when hunger begins. The hunger for interpretation, not to understand you, no, to resolve you, to force your mystery into a shape she can carry, even if it cuts her. You became a story she has to finish. She tells herself you're shy, no wounded, or maybe cruel. She doesn't know. So she tries on all three. You're the quiet one in the room, not quiet like peace, but quiet like fog before a storm. Every word you don't say is a blade she tries to grip, hoping it turns into a key, but it never does. It only bleeds new questions, and in the blood, she sees meaning. She sees symbols that aren't there, because the worst pain isn't rejection, it's uncertainty. She checks your social media, not to learn to decode. She scrolls like a monk reading bones. That one photo with the girl she zooms in, looks at the elbow touching yours. That quote you posted, she reads it 6 times, wondering if it's about her. And the worst part is, maybe it is. Maybe you knew what you were doing. Or maybe you just don't care. But she cares. She cares more than she admits. Because in a world of men begging to be legible, your refusal to be understood feels like power. And power, when denied, breeds obsession. She becomes her own narrator. He meant this. He's thinking that. He's testing me. Every moment is a test. Every text you don't send is a prophecy. And she grades herself constantly. Was I too much? Did I say something wrong? What if he's not ignoring me? What if he's waiting? You become a ritual she performs alone, in silence, with trembling hands. And still, she cannot stop, because the moment she stops, the emptiness returns. The black hole of your ambiguity. There is no closure in you, only contrast. You stand next to other men like a locked door next to an open cage, and even if the cage offers comfort, she finds herself drawn to the door, because the door implies choice. The door might open if she says the right thing, if she waits long enough, if she proves herself, and so she starves, willingly, for a morsel of certainty. She'd rather be haunted by what you might mean than bored by what someone else already said. You never promised her anything, but she hears promises in your silence, because her mind cannot tolerate the void, so it fills it with stories, versions of you, some cruel, some tender, all illusions, but illusions built on her own hunger. Hunger for definition, hunger for pattern. And when the pattern won't resolve, the hunger intensifies. She cannot let go, not because you've ensnared her, but because she has entangled herself in the need to know. And knowing is no longer about you. It's about her sanity. She starts rewriting the past. That time you didn't smile when she joked, was that indifference? Or something deeper? That compliment you gave, was it real or sarcastic? She replays it over and over, in bed, on walks, mid-conversation with friends. Your words live longer than you do, not because they were profound, but because they were incomplete, because they left room for echo. And echoes are what she feeds on now. This isn't love, this is limbo, and limbo lasts longer than love ever can. You didn't seduce her, you became unsolvable, and that, to her, is worse than being rejected. At least rejection is closure, at least rejection has shape, but you are a smear of smoke in a sealed room. She can't breathe, but she can't leave, because leaving would mean admitting there was never a shape to begin with. She starts dreaming about you, not vividly symbolically. She sees you at the edge of crowds, in mirrors, behind doors she can't open. She wakes up unsettled, not because you appeared, but because you didn't speak, and in the absence of your voice, her mind begins carving symbols again. You are no longer a man. You are a cipher, a test, a wound she fingers like a charm, and the wound keeps reopening, because she never understood where it came from in the first place. And when she does hear from you a message, a glance, a word, it's not relief, it's torment, because the message is never enough. It confirms nothing, it only sparks new questions. Why now? What did he mean by that? Is he playing with me? Your communication is a mirage. She chases it, only to find sand in her mouth. But she tells herself it's water, that the next word will quench, and so she stays thirsty. She's not stupid. She knows she's spiraling, but knowing changes nothing. Interpretation has replaced reality. You have become her not in your truth, but in her fiction. You live in her bloodstream now, in her doubts, in her diary, in the way she double-checks her makeup, because everything now is a performance for the ghost of your judgment, for the possibility of your return. You didn't say enough, so she has to say it all, to herself, and in the deepest part of the night, when even her mind is tired. She wonders if you ever think of her, if your silence is deliberate or just indifference, if the whole performance was only happening on her stage, and even that question becomes another loop of meaning, because she would rather believe in your silence as strategy than admit it might be emptiness. Because at least strategy can be beaten, but emptiness, that's eternal. She starts speaking in riddles to her friends. He's just different. There's something about him. I can't explain it. Of course she can't. Because the thing she's chasing doesn't exist. Not in you, not in words, but in the negative space between who you were and what she needed. She became the artist, and you were the blank canvas. You refused to be a painting, so she made a gallery from her own thoughts. And now she walks those halls every day, looking for the real you. You are not there, you never were, and still she searches, because the silence you left was not absence, it was infinity, an unfinished thing. And an unfinished thing is always more dangerous than a broken one. She could have forgiven a wound, but how does one forgive a question? This is the paradox: the less you give, the more she must. Her energy, her stories, her sanity. She gives until the mirror she made of you starts to crack, and still, she looks into it, hoping for shape, hoping for sign, but you do not speak. You never needed to. He who does not explain becomes a god in her myth, not because he is good, but because he is unfinished. You were never her equal, not because you were greater, but because you were incomplete. She couldn't place you, so she placed you above, not out of reverence, but desperation. Because in her world, everything must make sense. The man must make sense. His wounds must have shape. His gaze must have meaning. And when none of that arrived, she made you divine. Not because she believed in you, but because she could not reach you. And gods are not loved for their kindness. They are worshipped for their silence. She didn't fall for your soul. She fell for your outline, the unfinished edge of your presence, the part of you that never confirmed or denied her theories. And in the vacuum of truth, she built her altar. Every unanswered message, every unsent emoji, every unread glance, these were your scripture. She didn't need you to be kind. She needed you to be beyond, to be a puzzle without corners. And you were, not because you were cold, but because you never bowed. You never corrected her. You never handed her your biography, and that restraint became a throne. She can't stop thinking about what you might be, a villain, a poet, a liar who's secretly loyal. You gave her nothing but presence, and that became too much. Because a presence that does not shrink becomes unbearable. And now, she invents rituals to remember you, not obvious ones, quiet ones. She puts on music you once mentioned. She orders the drink you once half finished. She checks her phone at times you used to reply. This is how you become myth, not in the world in her, because she needed to elevate you in order to justify your distance. Your refusal to explain was not passive, it was sacred. You denied her what every other man handed her too easily: narrative. And without narrative, there is no comfort, only awe. You weren't better than them. You were just absent in a way they were too scared to be. And absence, when wrapped in form, becomes holiness. You became the god of what she could never prove. And so she obsessed, not out of love, but out of compulsion. You became the question she could not exercise. The altar grows. She talks about you in passing, but always vaguely. There's this guy. He's just different. She doesn't dare say too much, because naming you would shatter the illusion. Gods die when they're known, and so she guards your image, hides it, nurses it. Even when she hates you, she cannot destroy the shrine, because to destroy it would mean admitting that she built it alone, that you never earned the pedestal, you simply refuse to descend from it. There are moments she tries to test you, a message sent late, a story meant to provoke jealousy, a photo that begs for reaction. But you do not react, and your silence burns through her games, not because it hurts, but because it reveals. She sees herself now, dancing alone in the temple, chanting to an idol that does not breathe, and for a moment, she feels foolish. But the feeling passes, because it is easier to believe in a silent God than to believe in her own emptiness. She confesses you to her friends in pieces. He's probably narcissistic, or maybe just damaged. She says these things like spells, trying to lower you back to human size. But they do not work, because even her insults carry awe. Even her bitterness cannot undo the holiness of your omission. She mocks you with reverence, because deep down, she knows you are not the man she loved. You are the absence she failed to fill. And still, she waits. Not for you, for the meaning you stole. She believes that one day, you'll say something. One sentence, one truth. That will make it all make sense. That will justify her obsession. But the truth is, there is no truth. There is no secret waiting to be unlocked. You were never a riddle. You were just silent. And silence, to a hungry mind, becomes prophecy. She doesn't know how to let go, because letting go would mean killing the God she made. And gods, once made, infect the soul. She hears your silence in other men. She sees your shadow in glances that don't linger. You've become a pattern, she repeats, not to find you again, but to find herself in the act of pursuit. The pain has become sacred, and she would rather kneel than be free. There is no resolution, no ending, only echoes. You echo through her choices, her pauses, her hesitation before replying to new suitors, because what you denied her, that one explanation, has become her core myth. You left her with a wound that does not bleed, it pulses, and in that pulse, you live on. She prays you're thinking of her, but not with hope, with dread, because if you are thinking of her, it means she wasn't alone in the temple, that the God sometimes weeps, too. But if you're not thinking of her, then the temple is empty, and she built her altar in the ruins of a man who never looked back. You will never answer, not because you can't, but because the moment you do, the myth dies, and that is the final cruelty. That the God she worshipped was only a man who refused to speak. That the whole obsession was built on absence. That your divinity was just a mirror she held up to herself. And still, she listens. Not to you, but to what you might have said. She walks through the world waiting for signs. And every silence, every pause, becomes your ghost. She sees you in strangers, hears you in static, because obsession is not a chain, it is a language, and you taught her how to speak it. You were never extraordinary. You simply refused to explain, and in that refusal, you became infinite, not because you are, but because she could not finish you. You were the God of withheld answers, and she was the believer who could never stop asking the wrong question. There is a chapel in her mind where you still stand, faceless, unfinished. She lights a candle no one sees. It flickers once, then melts into the wax of all your unsentences. There is a dream she doesn't speak aloud where you finally turn, not to embrace her, but to ask, who did you think I was? She wakes before answering, and in that breathless moment before memory returns, she remembers the silence as if it once loved her back.